One.
There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away.
Hey, everybody, my people indeed. Welcome to the show. People popping in. How you doing? It is Monday, November 29th, 2021. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. Yes, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards and from across the country. On Friday, Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly into state and national politics. And you got to check out our Wednesday show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril is a progressive columnist from the Bucks County Courier-Times and the Intelligencer, and he joins me to drill down into Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and international politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just head on over to patreon.com/rcpress and choose your membership level. Now, tomorrow is Giving Tuesday, right? Now, look, you're not going to get a tax write-off for becoming a patron of Raging Chicken, I'll tell you right now. So I'm just putting that up front. But if you decide to become a patron tomorrow or today or the next day, right, you'll be given a gift that keeps the spotlight on the fight for a more equitable, just, and sustainable world. And we bring you the voices of people from the fight right in our own backyards and across the country. This Giving Tuesday, become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Just head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show by heading on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time we go live, and share it with your friends. Tweet it out right now. The show's still getting rolling, right? You can tweet that out right now. Get some more folks over here. You can also join our Discord server. Keep that conversation going all week long. Information on that is in tonight's show notes. And for more PA Progressive Talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook. Look, wherever you're going to get a stream, you're going to find Rick. And you really got to head over to the ricksmithshow.com for all the latest across all of his platforms. Tonight, like in about an hour from now, Rick will have his first show in Chicago now. That's right. He's on WBAI in New York, KPFK in Los Angeles. Chicago picked him up, and he's also in Minneapolis now, right? It's going gangbusters. Head on over to ricksmithshow.com to check out all the latest news. I can barely keep up these days. And if you haven't already, you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house, and they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at the Night Caucus. Yes, at the Night Caucus on Twitter, and subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. And attention gamers, look, holiday season is upon us. Got to head on over to the Game Inn. That's with Game Inn with two N's. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based, black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, like literally walls of Funko Pops. I kid you not. Right? And look, you know, it is the school season, so if your kid got the report card, they got an A, they get a discount. Right? How about that? Head on over there. Check them out. You check them out on their Facebook page. Just look up The Game Inn and follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. If you've got a question about the, a game, you have trouble finding something, look for something that's hard to get, shoot them a message over at thegamenpa@gmail.com. And a special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at Song a Day Man. That's at Song a Day Man on Twitter. Now I've got a little special ask for this Giving Tuesday. Yes, I know. You think I'm just going to say become a patron of Raging Chicken, patreon.com/RCPress. Of course, I'm going to say that multiple times throughout this show, right? But that's not my special ask. My special ask is to support the folks at Labor Notes, right? I've got a fundraiser going. Let's see. I'm going to put the link right in the show notes, right in the chat right now, and it'll be in the show notes after the show. Here is the link. It is over on Facebook. I know. But if you help support this fundraiser for Labor Notes, they're amazing. Labor Notes, look, I've been a subscriber for Labor Notes for years. I've gone to some of their workshops. I've learned more about organizing in a few days than I thought was even possible. Labor Notes has been an unyielding voice for rank and file worker organizing for as long as I can remember. They've been that voice in the labor movement who has had no tolerance for authoritarianism, racism, sexism, homophobia, nationalism, classism, outside and inside the labor movement. Sometimes that's put them at odds with the big bosses in the labor movement. But Labor Notes folks are amazing. Help me help the folks who are dedicated to building collective worker power across the country and the world. And follow that link that I just put there in the chat. Anything that you can give would be fantastic. Looking to raise about $1,000 for them before the end of the year. So I'd appreciate any help that you'd be willing to do. You can follow that link right there. It'll be in the show notes afterwards. And if you give tomorrow, if you wait till tomorrow to give that donation, it will be matched. So any amount that you put in, it will be matched. So if you do me that, the folks at Labor Notes will be more than grateful, and they will put it to good use in organizing for power. So on tonight's show, right, that's Giving Tuesday. I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but at tonight's show, here we are again. I'm going to welcome back to the show Nick Marcil back to the show. Nick, what's going on? Wait. I meant to ask you before the show, right? I have no idea. Is it Marcil? Marcil, right? I don't know why.
You're fine. No, fine.
I totally, but I'm sitting there before I had drawn this complete blank, and I'm like, Marcil? No, it's Marcil, right? I better ask him because I'm giving myself
as long as you don't say Marcil. I've heard that before. That's too much. I always say Marcil like a windowsill.
That's what I thought. Okay, good. So here we are.
Right.
We're going to be just dissecting names tonight here on the show. No, but Nick is a
Mahoney.
Yeah, right, exactly. Mahoney. That was my third grade teacher, Mrs. Beatty. Always called me that.
Oh gosh.
There you go. And she's like, Mahoney. Yep, so true. So anyways, Nick is a second-year master's student in higher education and policy and student affairs at Westchester University. He is a member of the PA Debt Collective, and he's a co-founder of PASSHE Defenders. And he was on the show last time talking about PASSHE Defenders. He's also called on the show a number of times, too, as well, to update us on happenings kind of around the state, especially when it was in the fight to try to prevent the consolidations and everything, which has been crazy and keeps on getting crazy. But anyways, the PA Debt Collective has joined forces with BuxMont DSA and Lower Bucks for Change to form the Bucks Cancel Lunch Debt Coalition. The coalition is working to raise awareness about K-12 school lunch debt and empower local residents to collectively seek ways to end this problem so that no student goes hungry or feels ashamed for needing food. The Bucks Cancel Lunch Debt Collection launched its first campaign focusing on the Bristol Borough School District, and for good reason. According to data from the school district, about 212 students in the approximately 1,200 student district, the 1,200 student district, owe a total of $15,875.31. Now, 75 students owe more than $50. In Bristol Township School District, 922 of approximately 6,200 students owe a total of $113,000 and $113 and $85,000. 772 students owe more than $50. And as the coalition put it in a recent editorial in the Courier Times, quote, the BCLDC, I knew I was going to screw that up, hopes to organize local students, teachers, parents, administrators, and community members to help free kids and their families from this debt and seek long-term solutions so that no child has to go hungry or be ashamed and embarrassed for not being able to afford lunch. And Nick, welcome to the show, man.
No, thank you very much for having me, Kevin.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really excited about what y'all are doing. I mean, and it seems to come right at the right time too as well. Like in the aftermath of all the school board races that have taken place, and the organizing that has been going around in school district, especially in Bucks County. There's people looking for, okay, well, how do we keep the organizing going? And more importantly, I think that the pandemic and this organizing around the school district has exposed long-standing needs within the school district among children. So before I kind of, launch into all my thoughts on this, give us a little background about, about the project, about the coming together, and why you're thinking you're starting in, say, the Bristol Borough.
Yeah, so, our coalition, as you had, pointed out, right, it's of the PA Debt Collective, BuxMont DSA, and Lower Bucks for Change. These organizations sort of found each other through, sort of talks and commonalities. And, really, of course, because BuxMont and Lower Bucks for Change are specifically, mainly folks within Bucks County, it was finding of, the real immense need that is within sort of like the Bristol Borough School District and sort of, like Bristol, like even just like as a whole. But as you pointed out, it's wild and, unimaginable to me to a certain extent, but also very not surprising to another that, more than 200 students have like a combined $16,000 almost in school lunch debt, which is, just insane to like, especially for me personally, to relate it to my current, student loan debt of a little bit more than that. It's just kind of like, wow. And like, these are, a bunch of kids and, that debt, a lot of people will say, oh, it's on their families or, it's not the kid's fault, which is true, but it's also not the family's fault either. As we always like to say, it's that, society is sort of preventing these kids from the means to live. The only way in which we have those means is through getting debt and through getting this lunch debt or getting, student loan debt or, car payments and debt and mortgages and such is how we have our society run. And it's, extremely apparent, with school lunch debt, especially as you were saying, with the pandemic and, just people realizing these issues and problems that are there that just haven't been addressed because, we just decide to say, well, we'll push it off or, only saying, sometimes and not all the time of, we're going to put these things in place to stop like shaming kids. Yet still, I saw like, a YouTube video just the other day that was from 2 years ago of a school district in PA, which was basically threatening, parents of kids with school lunch debt to say, we will get you into delinquency court and, have your kids taken to foster care. I really just don't understand why it needs to come to that with a kid who maybe, let's say, has even $50 in school lunch debt. It's just insane.
Well, and it's funny is like once all these school districts, and again, it's been a long time since I was in, kind of public school, obviously, right? But, when my kids started going to public school, seeing that now everything is online, right? Where you actually have to add money to these accounts and where if your kid happens to be hungry and they go get food, that's charged against these accounts. So it's like you're like turning like lunch into a financial tradable commodity practically. Yep. Where you're holding it over parents and and ultimately the kids, right? Because I know there's been cases, there's on the one end of things, you have what you've already mentioned about the shaming, like where kids would show up and say, oh, you know what? No, because now everybody's got the computer there, you have debt, and they'll actually sometimes dump the lunch right into the trash right in front of them. Right. But then on the other end, right, then it's like, then withholding things like diplomas, right, because they have food debt. Right. And, I just come at this like this is like, let's take the worst case scenario. Let's say that you have parents that are neglectful. Right. Parents that are not kind of like, doing what they should do. Right. And we could be angry at the parents. But so even in that case, you're telling me that because the way we feel about what the parents are doing, we're going to tell that kid they're going to have to go hungry? I mean, even at that level, right, it doesn't even make sense, right? So, I mean, this is why when you're kind of focusing on lunch debt, it seems to me to be like such a no-brainer. Right. Let's make sure, like, we know all the studies, right, about the relationship between food and learning. Right. And if the goal is to give these kids a shot, right, every kid a shot, we want to make sure that they've got food. I mean, how hard is that?
Exactly. And, to even emphasize that, in my own, like, personal life briefly, I can just recall all the times, and, I'm now like a grad student, and, I literally just a few days ago went to my 5-year high school reunion. But, thinking like back to that I remember all the time hearing, teachers say, make sure that you get a good breakfast or a good lunch before you maybe take the ACT or the SAT or, any of my tests or this, that, and the other, because of how important that is. It's extremely important. And you don't want a kid not only to, not go not without like a nutritious and full meal, for their own sake, but also just educationally, it can very much stunt them in, what will happen within the classroom and further on down the line, which is exactly why we need things like this, and is exactly why, you see Congresswoman Omar and Senator Sanders both, pushing for this like universal school meals program act of basically extending what, President Biden had, sort of done of, having the like USDA to say, hey, school districts, everyone, kind of has to get a free lunch. It's the pandemic, but then sooner or later, they're going to turn that off to all kids. Like I know my brother who's, right now in high school, all of us, we had gotten letters saying, it's free to you, don't worry. But if you can qualify for free and reduced lunch, which definitely can be hard for a lot of families, especially in areas which like the median household income is a lot higher, or like, living costs are a lot higher, to be able to meet those thresholds, it can be a lot harder, which is why we just need these universal programs. And as you said, Kevin, it's really a no-brainer, because why is it that you want a kid to have to go hungry, or why is it that you decide we're going to, because they have a certain amount of debt, like shame them, give them a different lunch, withhold a diploma, prevent them from going to prom or a club or something like that? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And, also, even if we're to say, to try to blame the parents in one way or another, the kids will find out about that too. Like, right? Like,
Totally.
those like blaming and shaming too of the parents impacts the kid themselves, just because you'll see it. Like I know myself personally, I was on free and reduced lunch for a period of time in high school. And that was, as I'll say, only thanks to a guidance counselor that I had that, told my family, made us aware. But it's something I can tell you that, my father definitely, didn't necessarily want me to be on, because there's certain stigma, certain shame, on it. But that's why these universal like programs sort of eliminate that, because it's like, it doesn't matter. Like everyone can go and get it. But you know what? If your parents want to send you with a lunch, that's cool as well. But just if you go to school, you can get a lunch. You're a kid. Why,
No, and I think that's right. And I was thinking a lot about this because as horrific the pandemic has been, obviously, I mean, for obvious reason, and we kind of nearly 800,000 people dead in this country, not to mention the deaths around the world, right? And the kind of the isolation that's taken place. There's also been this moment of seeing something different, right? Just like we see this kind of like unprecedented wave of resignations from people's jobs, who are saying, you know what, I'm not going to do that crap anymore. I'm not going to be like abused at work. Why am I going to do this? And why am I going to break my back for something where I can barely pay my bills? So being people, rethinking their lives. And again, I don't want to overextend this, right? But this whole idea of the universal free lunch, right, was, we got to see it like full hand, right? So like in my school district and school districts across the state and across the country, they said, okay, nobody has to pay for lunches, right? It's everyone gets a breakfast, everyone gets a lunch, right? If you don't need to ask, you don't need to show a card, you don't have to kind of like bring in the kind of the mark, right? That that you are like that was got this special program. No, you just got up and got the lunch, and it was remarkable. it was like suddenly all the stigma's gone, right? And all the monitoring is gone. Right. And so, I mean, I think about this kind of growing kind of like, surveillance state, right? This growing way of that kind of like, again, look, I grew up, but like my mom, we were a single parent family for a good chunk of growing up. And we were on welfare, right? We had food stamps and like for a chunk of time. And, I can tell you the worst part about it is that you're suddenly under surveillance every single aspect of your day. You have more paperwork to fill out, like just to prove that you're poor, right? I mean, it's so bizarre. And this was a case during the pandemic where you got to see that was all taken away. And we had universal. So that means also all that kind of money that's invested in monitoring and the technology of kind of checking out and tracking parents down and policing that's all gone too. And so that money goes to food and to kids. It seems, I mean, again, this is like also the argument for why the universal programs are absolutely essential, right? And it also is a way of kind of like bringing the community together because you're not pitting people against each other.
Exactly. Well, I always equate it to, just thinking of a public library where it's like you just walk in, sure, you have your library card, everyone just gets a library card, as I will say, for certain circumstances, maybe not, but like, to my knowledge, it's just like, okay, just go sign up. I get my library card and then look, I can just go in, I can get a book. I don't have to do anything. And it's really just simple. And as you were saying, with the whole monitoring thing, that's exactly what happens. And, we end up seeing with like lunch debt, just like any other kind of debt, that sometimes it could just be sold on a secondary market. And then you have, these collection agencies or collectors, calling for, just like small amounts of debt, like, maybe it's like $50 or $75. And, it's just absurd. But that's exactly, to a certain extent, what we know we can do and should do, right? Because that's what already happens with debt. So we know we can actually and should demand that this school district cancels the debt, but maybe us as a coalition, we give them a bit of money, right? Just like a secondary, debt buyer sort of would do, right? So like, if right now, like I currently have like, $1,000 or, so in medical debt from an emergency room visit that, maybe let's say, I don't pay it. And then later down the line, a collector sort of calls me and says like, hey, you still owe $1,000. And it's like, wait, what? You're not the hospital. Da, 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 da. And then I, come to find out, wait, this person bought that debt for pennies on the dollar. You know what? We should and we can do the same thing with lunch debt. Totally. And especially, for these kids, because, it's just really absurd to think of these statistics. But I had looked up at, some of the stuff from, as I said, Congresswoman Omar and Senator Sanders and others who had, signed on to this Universal School Meals Program Act. But, almost 30 million children in this country rely on free or reduced lunch. And, the waivers that we currently have, if those were to expire, there are so many students that, in like their homes with incomes, let's say 130% above the federal poverty line, which is only about like $35,000 for a family of four, or, a little bit higher than that. I think it's around like $49,000 for a family of four. That's, just reduced lunch. So, it just gets me thinking like, what about people who, maybe it's a higher living cost, or even then it just shouldn't matter. You shouldn't have to spend all this time and this money to try to justify just giving a kid a lunch and, and just gatekeeping this because it's a lunch and these are kids.
So take us into then a little bit about what this looks like, right? So we've got the principals, right? We've got here, you've got this coalition now of people that have already been doing organizing on the ground and are kind of working here. So take us into kind of like what's happening right now with the coalition. How is this organizing taking place? And what's it look like to kind of build kind of the organizing around this project?
Yeah, so to preface a bit, back in September, we had what we called a lunch debt assembly. So sort of along the ideas of what, has been done with the debt collective of debt assemblies, where, people come together and they talk about the debts that they have. Because, what happens in society is so many people, incur debt, in order to live. However, we feel personally shamed on that debt,
Right.
and not realizing or not thinking, necessarily fully that it's actually society that should be shamed for the debts that we have. So, with that, we wanted to sort of do that, with this lunch debt, and, had this lunch debt assembly, like in Bristol, at sort of like a park, and, talked with some folks, like there were some of us there, as well as, some local folks, as well as, like maybe some teachers or so on. And, basically just talking about like what this debt means for each of us, and like our perspectives, and maybe, personal stories, as I said, like of me being on free introduced lunch, someone else from our sort of coalition sharing some testimonials that they got about, how, kids felt, which some of them were like tossed into the op-ed that you had mentioned earlier. And, hearing from others, let's say if you are like a teacher in a school, and how you see this affect your kids, or how you
Right.
see that you decide, what, like as a teacher, or, maybe as a cafeteria worker, I'm going to pay off some of this kid's lunch debt because I feel bad. And that's totally understandable. And that's exactly what I would want to do in that situation. However, we need to get these people who are interested in, having that sort of charitable mindset to say, we need to come together as a coalition to advocate and push for this. So that's, what we're sort of continuing to doing now, and doing some more groundwork in, maybe going to like a local, school board meeting and such, as well as sort of, trying to connect with other folks sort of in the like more exact, like Bristol Borough area, in order to get them, like interested, in helping us fight for this, right? Because, even if it's just, let's say, the, couple of us that are, in this coalition, doing this, come together and go to a school board meeting, while that's going to be great, it would be even better to have more people sort of, together, almost to an extent using like, what the right wing has done with CRT, but for a real just cause of saying no student should go hungry, no student should be debt shamed, no family should have to worry about this. It should be free. And yes, for any of those, libertarians or whatnot that are going to say there's no such thing as a free lunch, there is. I had it. It was free at the point of service. It was paid through taxes, but that's what we need to do, and that's what we should be doing in society. And, as I'll say, this is just what we're continuing to doing to, do some more of this outreach, and to, say for anyone out there who is listening, especially those within sort of the Bucks County or, like Bristol sort of like area, come to our next Zoom meeting. We're having one on December 3rd at 5 p.m.
Which is Friday, right?
And,
This Friday.
yeah. And you can email us at nolunchdebt@gmail.com. That's nolunchdebt@gmail.com. And that way you can get the Zoom link. You can join in. If you're a part of an organization and you want to sort of loop yourself into the coalition, we would be more than happy to have you, because, we're really looking to sort of expand this and get folks aware that, like, this can be done. Just as I said before, just think of debt in any other instance. It gets bought, it gets sold, it gets collected on. However, we want to say cancel the debt. But we understand as a school district, they have their own financial problems, especially ones that, might have, so many students and their families that might be like at or below the poverty line, and, just how their sort of finances are like as a school district, and understanding upon that. However, any of those kids and their families, as well, I've very much learned, with the Debt Collective in a book, Can't Pay, Won't Pay, is when, a family can't pay, they're not gonna pay. And,
Right.
That's something that, these people who are like, we need to monitor them, we need to like knock on their doors, give them pink slips, like whatever, in order for them to pay off this debt, which will not get paid off. Like, even if you could get like 1% of that debt, that's like nothing. So you're not going to get it. So just cancel it outright.
100%. You know what? And I think that I mentioned this before the show, and I don't know how many people are familiar with this term. So I'll give you just a brief context. Is that there's been this term that's been started to use called Sidewalk Socialist, right? And it harkens back to what was called the Sewer Socialist of Milwaukee, where they're kind of with these folks who won municipal elections, right, and actually kind of run kind of majorities on city councils and stuff, and really focused on things like infrastructure, delivering tangible kind of results to the kind of communities that are around there. And there's been this new wave that's kind of getting the moniker called like Sidewalk Socialist. And in these times have been doing some great reporting on this. And they just won 27 races, right, in municipalities across the country, right? Somersville, Massachusetts is the one that's getting a lot of attention right now because they actually have control of the city council there too as well. And their focus is on really kind of tangible deliverables, right, about imagining, say, a different approach there. And I kept on coming back to this project and saying, this is exactly the kind of thing that we can begin, right? When we're thinking about what are we trying to do, what kind of ethos, what kind of ethic, right, of a community do we want to kind of inhabit? And well, where does the rubber meet the road? Well, for kids, that's school. Right. And, we have an opportunity to have a clear influence over like what our schools are. And as you mentioned already, we've seen like an angle where you have these like people from the right wing kind of blowing up this nonsense about CRT and like, all this other kind of stuff, the anti-masking battles and all this kind of stuff, which is like a battle over kind of like, just freaking nonsense, as opposed to something like this with saying, hey, we can actually work together to accomplish these things for our kids, right? And not only does it help our kids, it actually helps our community because we're collectively solving problems together, right? And it seems to me to be like such a, it's like one of these things, right? It's obvious that it's needed, right? Once it presents itself. Once you all got this coalition together and said we should have free lunch in our schools, like. It's obvious we should have been doing this for the past 20 years, right? Organizing around exactly these things. And it seems to me that it's a perfect time to be doing this too. Again, in the aftermath of these elections that were so contentious, and also having a window into what, like I mentioned before, from the pandemic, what it looks like to actually have a universal program. And I know, and I mentioned this to you before the show too, I know there's a couple times my daughter left her lunch at home or forgot it back in the classroom. And, she was like feeling bad. And then, but then she's like realized, oh, I can go get lunch. Right. And she has some friends, right, who normally would be like, on the kind of the school lunch program. Right. And there was no separation anymore. Right. They could go get lunch together. Right, all feel the same, sit together, right, and all this stuff without that other kind of separation that is kind of built into these, these monitoring programs. So it's like, it seems so. Like, I mean, I know, like this program is just kind of, or your kind of coalition is kind of really just getting rolling at this point. I'm glad you mentioned, I did put the link for the website in the tonight's show notes, because there's also a link there if you're interested in joining that Zoom meeting at 5 p.m. This Friday at the December 3rd. There's a meeting that if you want to find out about how to kind of expand this, because while it's starting in Bristol, right, there is no reason why this can't be a Bucks County wide program, right? And have that kind of organizing that's going forward. And I know that I've heard from multiple parents, kind of even in my neck of the woods, where we've had this kind of, these intense kind of cultural battles going on, that are looking for opportunities to kind of say build off that organizing. And it seems to me is something that we could think about this. Yes, we got Bristol, but then let's see what we can do in other parts of the county too as well, to really kind of come together around our kids. I mean, that seems to be a pretty low bar in my mind.
Yeah, and also to like reiterate of what you were saying with timing, I mean, it's very much the right time that this needs to be happening, because come when we come when the USDA sort of finishes out with this school year doing this as like kind of free lunch for everyone currently, we're going to go back to like a system of like no universality and this continued means testing of things, which I know can affect so many different families. Like I'll say briefly for myself that part of the reason why I had free introduced lunch was because my dad had lost his job at a certain point. And that's something for many families that might be teetering on that line. They don't necessarily know what sort of, benefits might not be there or
Right.
might be there, because they haven't necessarily experienced that before. Or, maybe it's like, hey, you lose it one week and then you get a job a month later and then your kid is, off of that program.
Exactly.
And you don't, you have no clue of how to, juggle the balls. I mean, that's exactly why, these universal programs are so necessary, because then it doesn't matter. I mean, it's the same reason why I'm always an advocate for Medicare for all, because it's like, when my father loses his job or my mom loses her job, or, maybe if I'm over 26 and I have employment, then I don't need to worry about when, I have to worry about having health insurance, or, when I have like, an emergency room visit and my insurance that didn't really do anything, or, there is no insurance. And now look, I can't.
No, exactly. We just got a comment from Chuck who basically said somebody recently just gave an anonymous donation to the Penridge School District to pay school lunch debt. It was about $5,000 to $6,000, for example.
And if I'm not mistaken, and I forget the exact number and such, I know that there was something like that within, I forget if it was the Bristol Township or Bristol Borough, fairly similar, but I believe it was Giant, like the grocery store, in that way, but to say, well, that charity can be great. We also need to fight for these long-term universal programs and solutions that will, continue that, because while yes, it's like, okay, great, we're wiping out the debt for, all these kids now. What's going to happen in a year from now when those same kids or, other families, are going to have this debt, just incur over time because they don't have the ability to pay? Or like so many families, debt is something where it migrates everywhere, right? Like, when you have medical debt and then you have a mortgage debt and you have, like debt for a car or lunch debt, right? There are certain times that as, a family, they're going to prioritize certain bills because that's what they have to do in order to survive. And sometimes that lunch debt is something that they just leave off.
Absolutely. And it's kind of what you mentioned there about having people that are, have a job this week and next week and things like this, but then the job goes away. And I think about as work becomes more and more precarious, right? And more piecemeal and haphazard. And we saw this not just with the pandemic, but, the whole kind of gigification of our entire economy, whereas, it's like people trying to piece together work. Yeah, okay, great. You might get a nice paycheck for a few weeks, driving your Uber, your car breaks down, right? You're out of work for 2 weeks. What happens then, right? And so little things like this, and to talk about that, about this universal kind of first get rid of the lunch debt, and then a universal kind of free lunch where it builds in stability, right? It kind of a leveling out of that kind of experience. So that's one less thing for parents to do. I could know one of the things that is the biggest nightmare, of course, is that if you qualify for these current programs, we have to fill out this paperwork and all this stuff. What happens if you're in that kind of precarious situation, right? Where your income is fluctuating kind of dramatically. So you might be qualifying for it, but then you find out what 3 months in that you're no longer qualify for it. Then you have to resubmit paperwork when you need to qualify again. I mean, think about the burden that also places on families. And like legitimately, if you're in that situation, you're working kind of to piece together an income, a family sustaining income. When you might miss something, right? And you might think you're still qualifying. And now then suddenly you're like, oh, wait a minute. And you got somebody coming after you saying, no, you owe us money because, things like this. And you remove all of that. And I think that, there's been this big concern about kind of, children's mental health and the pandemic and all this stuff. If we can do that for our kids, right, and their families, and building that kind of stability, right, kind of stabilize at least one thing, right, which research shows is absolutely essential for education. It seems to me this has got to be a win.
Yeah, no, agreed. And, it needs to be something people can come around and realize we can win together, and also just use this, in a sense, this is a very local issue for so many communities, and something that really is a no-brainer for so many people to start actually advocating for and pushing their own school districts for. I mean, I'm currently trying to email to get information of my home district because I'm interested to see what the data is there. And, I definitely would, encourage others to maybe even do the same, because it's interesting to see these numbers, like debt with anyone. You don't know, because it's not something that you can like, easily tell of, people in their like living situations. You might think like, oh, wow, look at that house. Or you might think, wow, that's like, a nice car, or, oh, they always, like have X, Y, and Z. But a lot of people don't understand sometimes the extreme debt that is incurred for a lot of these things. And maybe, as you were saying, and as I had said, of, one minute you have a job, next minute you don't. And that was very much the case also with the pandemic, which is why it's, really important to be fighting for this now, when so many people are, maybe unemployed, or maybe had their pay cut, or, who knows. And, maybe even sometime near the future, maybe they'll get a little bit more of their pay back, and then their families, they'll be off of some of those programs. And something like this is extremely necessary.
Right. So it seems to me like in something like that, in this kind of organizing too, as well, you can see like, I'm thinking about like the steps that one has to build, right, in order to kind of work up for this. Like one you've already mentioned is simply like looking into these questions about kind of what kind of debt do are like students and their families carrying right now, right? How much debt is in this kind of school districts? And that alone, right, is an opportunity for kind of groups of people to kind of work together around this kind of sharing of information to kind of understand what's happening in their district. And I think you're absolutely right, is it's surprising to some folks, right? Because it's not the kind of thing that you necessarily see all the time, right? And you might think that, okay, everything's going to fine. You end up, someone that you might even know, right? Go to church with, right? You kind of like work with or something. You find out that their kids are struggling in order to kind of meet their food needs, and this is something that you find like in kind of both, say, urban areas and rural areas and everywhere in between, and it seems like something we could do. And I think that in some ways, I think that it could be even more of an issue in some of the rural areas where you have kids that are really spread out, right? That are, this is the one place that they're going to have, an opportunity to really kind of get that meal. So, you've got this meeting coming up on Friday. And so I'm curious just a little bit about kind of like, if people are interested in kind of showing up for this meeting, do they need tickets? No, but I mean, walk us through a little bit about what you hope to kind of, hope this meeting to be about, and as kind of thinking forward for next moves.
Well, jokingly, yes, they need to fill out every single form that you need to fill out in order to get a free lunch, right? No, but no, definitely, like anyone is welcome who's, like interested in this fight, right? We're definitely looking for folks, especially within sort of like Bucks County, Bristol area, who, want to like help with this, but we're going to be sort of continuing, our, you could say, I guess, like last legs of like, strategizing for like for our sort of win and our victory of really canceling this lunch debt, right? So the debt collective, let's say, has a certain amount of money, let's say, like a few grand, and are willing to say, hey, school district, we want you to cancel the debt, we'll give you this much for it, right? Because as I said before, that's what already happens with debt on a secondary market. And similarly, like this, about $16,000, the school district's not going to see all of that.
Right.
They're going to be lucky if they see like even 10% of it. So, at least, getting some people together who are interested in this and willing to sort of come together and sort of are, strategizing of, where we go and where we're continuing to go, to really get this victory to happen. And, just make sure that in the richest country in the world that like no kid goes hungry, no kid gets shamed. And, for God's sakes, like no one has to have debt to have a
Jesus,
lunch.
like,
I know. Why, just like it just bothers me so much, because it's like, as you said earlier on, Kevin, like, we're just commodifying this. Just something that's as simple as like a kid's lunch or breakfast or like whatever. And yeah, for so many kids that just can be like their one meal during the day or two meals during the day, and where they can get something consistently, because you don't necessarily know what's happening at home. And that's very much the same mindset that I know a lot of like teachers and administrators are in, that like as a public school, like, or just as a school in general, like, that is what they are, one of the like main things that they are there to do, which is to provide some of these basic necessities that as a society we should understand are that and need to be treated as such and given as such just for free.
100%. Well, listen, I hope people will check this out. Again, it's the link is in tonight's chat, and I will make sure that it is in the show notes that will take you over to the event for this Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. And that will be held on Zoom, so you don't need to drive anywhere, right? You just got to kind of click RSVP for the Zoom link. You get sent that link, and you find out what it's about. And I think it's also, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but it'd be the kind of thing like, look, even if you're not right in the Bristol area, right, but you want to find out more about a little bit about how the organizing started and how you might kind of bring this to your own community. I mean, I'm thinking, look, Bristol, kind of lower Bucks. Here I sit in upper Bucks, right? I know there's been a ton of organizing that's going around in upper Bucks. It'd be really kind of interesting to see what we could get going up here too as well, to kind of parallel these efforts. I mean, that would be, in my mind, like an amazing achievement. Yeah. And I start thinking about, yes, we can look into some baby steps here, right? We can look into how much, does a lunch that is being held in the Pembridge School District or the Palisades School District, or is kind of over in Central Bucks. I mean, how much would be in the Quakertown School District, right? I mean, we can look into this, we can find these numbers, and then we can, see what we're dealing with. And then we can also, look, just like you said, with the debt collective, right? Have some money that they'll go and look, we're going to try to buy out this debt. What would it look like as an organizing effort to help raise some of this money to help do this kind of stuff and learn through people like the PA Debt Collective how this happens and how we do this, right? So that's the kind of thing that I would imagine would be completely appropriate to kind of show up and ask these kind of questions
Definitely.
with, so we can learn how to organize in this score. Nick, before we kind of take off and kind of close this this part of the show, anything that you want people to know, any other kind of additional information you want to go over? What do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, no, just as you said, for folks who are listening and who are interested, if you want to show up Friday at December 3rd at 5 p.m. on Zoom, definitely feel free to. If you don't want to share your screen, maybe you're like, in the middle of, making dinner or whatnot, totally fine, right? Just come, talk to us, see how you can, sort of collaborate with us, in this effort. And maybe there are, tips and suggestions that we can give to you for it. Just, make sure to email us at nolunchdebt@gmail.com. That's nolunchdebt@gmail.com. And, check out if you want to our, lunch debt assembly that we had. I know I put that in the chat. Similarly, as Kevin had shared before, check out the op-ed or even the website on the BuxMont DSA site. And just check out each of our organizations of the PA Debt Collective, which I'm a part of, or BuxMont DSA or Lower Bucks for Change, with some of the other great work that I know that they're doing. And just see if maybe you're a part of an organization and you want to just join on to this coalition, because we would love to have other partners in this fight to really make sure that no kid goes hungry and no kid gets debt and no kid gets debt shamed, for just trying to get a lunch or breakfast at school.
100%. And like I said, that is, if we can't reach that as the kind of a bar, right, that kind of bring everybody together around something to kind of, we're doing something for our kids. Look, there's always going to be people on the margins who are going to say, no, kids should go starve, right? But you know what? Those are like the few and far between. Most of the folks are looking for ways that we can actually come together as a community in doing this. And I keep on hearing these cries out there like, we need unity in our community. We need to bring people back together. This seems to be like a way to do this, right? And doing something that's really tangible and concrete and can build into a revisioning of what our communities and what our society, what our country can be like. Right? When we have a different way, a different mentality, like an ethos of caring and not of shaming. So anyways, Nick, I appreciate you kind of joining us tonight so much. And again, the information about where to go for the meeting on Friday is in the show notes. And like Nick said, you can check them out, nolunchdebt@gmail.com. And if you have any questions, you can always kind of email me at ragingchickenpress@gmail.com with information. I can put you in touch with those folks. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back after this, I'll have some kind of closing thoughts and idea. But Nick, I appreciate you so much for coming out. And man, great luck with the campaign. I'll be keeping tabs on y'all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin.
All right, here we go. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. We will be right back after this quick break. Hey, everybody. It's Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken, back here once again for a little kind of like, I still haven't really thought of a good name for this part of the show, because it's not like the second half, because it's not really a half, right? It's also like, so I've thought about it, there was a time, if you recall, early on in Altitude Live, I had this thing called like, I think it was like the afterword or something like this, and that's kind of something that we could continue to use. But really, it's an opportunity for, if folks got questions, got thoughts, concerns, you want to call into the show. If you want to call in, remember, you can go right down kind of below in the show notes. You check out how to log into riverside.fm. You're welcome to call into the show. Just make sure that you turn off or mute your YouTube, so you're not getting the feedback and the delays. So you're listening right through Riverside. If you've got questions you want to throw in the chat, I mean, Nick is sticking around for a little bit, so if you do have questions particular for him, feel free to throw them in the chat. A couple things that I just wanted to, I guess, kind of close out with a little bit on the recoup. Ooh, Emily, the recoup. Oh, I like that. The recoup. I like it. I think the second act. Chris comes in with. Look, I should have just asked everybody first. The second act. That's great. The Riku, the second act. Oh, that's fantastic. This is great. Yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned, say briefly here, I know there's been a lot of organizing that's taken place around the school districts, and like I said when we had Laura Putnam on a couple weeks back, I don't think the parents and community members who organize, say for example in the Penridge School District or in the Palisades School District, Central Bucks, and late in the game I started getting people getting in touch with me from up in Quakertown School District. What's remarkable in my mind is that, yes, it's true, we didn't win a lot of those elections, but that was some of the best organizing I've seen in ages, right? I mean, and what Laura Putnam, who kind of studies this stuff really kind of closely and looks at this and puts out, this is the kind of organizing should taking place. Folks in the communities were doing it right. And kind of being part of that in a cursory way. I mean, like, look, I mean, if I'm, I'll be 100% honest here, is like, I was not at those, at those meetings, those organizing meetings. Even the school board, meetings were taking place while I'm doing this show. So I'll be clear, I don't want to even assume I have any credit for this stuff. I'm really saying watching these organizers take place and being, connected to them in kind of little ways, having folks at the school board on, and then talking to a lot of the organizers in some Facebook groups and so on. The work was amazing. It was absolutely kind of amazing. And what I keep on hearing now too, as well, is the need to build this out now, and really think about a Bucks County wide, like organizing effort, and what that looks like and what shape that takes place is, I don't think anybody knows at this point. But it seems to me something like this, where you're talking about against lunch debt, this would make, like this would be a great project, right? Where, and again, it doesn't have to be the only project that goes on, but it's one of these things where it actually allows us to kind of work kind of collectively together, gathering information, strategizing, right? Having kind of something to bring to our school board meetings, right? That is really kind of something to offer, right? And something to kind of make a case for, as we are going to have to continue to, defend, I don't know, facts in schools, right? About like real history, not the kind of whitewashed version or the Disney-fied version of history. I mean, we still have to do all that stuff. I totally get it. But this is one of these things that could really have a concrete impact on kids' daily lives, and it's just phenomenal what's going on here. So anyway, so that's my, very amorphous reach out to say, this would be kind of a cool project. And I know I keep on saying, like, we got to find some way of doing this. And I know I'm a little bit reaching there too, as well, saying like, well, how do we do this? I don't know, but I know people are already doing it. So I have this vision in my head, right? But that I've, I recognize my own limits, right? So I've gotten to this point in my life, right, where I'm very conscious about not wanting to kind of go for it. So we should do X if I am not willing to kind of take point on it, right? Or at least being of this, because I know the work that's involved with organizing. but I saw some of this stuff coming together, and we've been back and forth with some folks already between different school districts. It's like, it would be so freaking cool to have like a countywide assembly, so to speak, right? Where, we just get to kind of connect with activists across the county, and activists that are not necessarily kind of like, campaign operatives for particular candidates from the Democratic Party, for example. But I mean, people that are doing organizing on the ground. And people that, I'm not saying that, they can't be those people, but I'm just saying people that are interested in, a more equitable, a more just kind of, county. Right. And I really do look to a lot of those folks that are doing that sidewalk socialist stuff that are saying like, look, how do we organize around real issues in our community and in ways that can actually have an effect and better the lives of people around us? And I've mentioned this before on the show, but the very first interview I ever did with Raging Chicken was back in was it 2011. It was kind of a fluke, right? It just so happens that this person was coming to Kutztown University. I had launched Raging Chicken about 3 months beforehand, and I was like, let me give this a shot. Right? Why not? He's coming to campus, and it was Noam Chomsky, right? So that was the very first interview I ever did, right? And if you listen to the audio, I've re-released it a few times. The audio's horrible, right? I've had to do all sorts of things just to make it, just so you can understand parts of it. But one of the things in that conversation that he emphasized, and it stuck with me, and look, organizers of all sorts will tell you this. It's some of the most powerful social movements started out as things like, getting a street light at a dangerous intersection where kids or people were getting hit and killed. Right? Where they got together and they said, we recognize there's a problem in our community, right? How can we organize collectively and let's demand this and let's get it fixed? Let's think about not just like critique about what's wrong, but let's actually work and get elected to positions and fix the problem. And then once the problem gets fixed, right, you now have established a certain kind of sense of collectivity, right? You've done that hard work, as Laura Putnam had said, right? You've exercised the muscles of democracy, right? Which is different than just kind of getting up and criticizing somebody, right? And it's like you exercise the muscles of democracy and figured out how things are doing, learning about the kind of the mechanisms of power, right? And then kind of enacting those things, right? At a very localized level. And then once you get that victory for that streetlight, right? Then you say, what's next? What's the next problem? Right? And then you build out that organization, right? I mean, and so, in small ways, that's what I imagine is possible right now in Bucks County. And I do think with there's a certain kind of focal point that we've got coming up pretty quickly, right? I mean, obviously we've got the midterm elections in 2022. You got Brian Fitzpatrick, who's the, who's the ruler of the roost in the PA1, the first district. And there's a lot of folks that would love to see an alternative to Brian Fitzpatrick. And I'm one of them, let me be clear, right? But I'm also someone who's like, okay, look, I've also watched the Democratic Party in Bucks County that has, flown in candidates every election cycle, right? And the candidates are not kind of coming out of an organized base within the county. And that is, I want to be clear, I'm not pointing fingers or faulting people for that. Just a lot of complicated reasons why that's the case. But what I just got a vision of, and I think that a lot of other folks got the vision of here in Bucks County, was that there is an organizational base, right? There is a basis of support for something different where, okay, that candidate might be a Democratic Party candidate, but guess what? If you have an organized base, right, then we get to have a say in who that candidate is. Right. And guess what? And if we get that candidate elected, right, we're the ones who can push that candidate once they're in office. Right. And so, it's like it's this moment where you have the consultant version, right, of an alternative or the rank and file organized communities version of political power. And I think in Bucks County, we really are at a certain kind of turning point where we have an opportunity to take that by the horns. And I'm also, I see that possibility, and I also recognize the work that's entailed in order to do this, right? I have no illusions that this is something you can flick a switch and suddenly there's a coalition, right? But I do know that there are people who organize around the school district who are better organizers than I will ever be or ever have been. Right. In particular, I mean, I have these people in my, I don't want to call them out on the show because I don't want to kind of, put a necessarily spotlight on them, right? But in these particular women who are organizing in some of these Facebook groups who are just like doing amazing work. The political candidates that I had most close contact with in the Penridge School District from Penridge United were doing amazing work. Right. And every week I'm telling you, when you do organizing at all, there's these moments of, I can't believe we're going to forget the name of the book. There's this book, they call it The Whirlwind, right? But this is what it means, like all these things come together. And I don't want to sound too corny here, but it's like the magic happens, right? And part of that magic is when you have, say, like an event or, just like a door knocking day, right? And then watching kind of organizers coming together, following those days and saying like, okay, like this is what kind of went really well. I had this conversation. Somebody else jumps in and say, yes, what over here? You know what? I was thinking we could do this instead. Oh, that's a good idea. Like, why don't we do over there? Hey, why don't we fold this into a script, which we can kind of pull out from over here? And it's this moment of what I would, it feels like magic, right? It's that idea that you're doing this work together, right? And coming up with something better. And it's that action reflection, right? It's that praxis of building organizing, which was going on kind of everyday basis. So, I do have, this has been uncharacteristic for me, for those folks who know me as the dark cloud in every room, right? But this has been a moment of hope for me, even though, like I said, even though we didn't win these school board elections, I see a lot of hope on the horizon. So that's my 2 cents for closing out. So I don't know, Nick, I've just been, just got kind of, it's like rolling here, but, I mean, I kind of, closing thoughts, where are you at in all this?
No, I would say fairly similar of, there is a lot, there is a lot to be done in many ways, and a lot that we, can do. And it really is sort of about, understanding yourself and others and where sort of, like the movements and organizing sort of lies, right? Because it's not going to just be me saying like, we need to organize around this. It needs to be like, what are those issues, sort of within Bucks County or within, whatever local areas, in which you live, and, finding the ways to really help bring people together in, some sort of coalition or group and such to really, like fight for something, in which people are going to be sort of like dedicated to at least do something, even if it's just showing up for like a weekly or bi-weekly meeting, or even if it's just, for them feeling like, what, I feel like I have the motivation and, the sort of help from others or support from others to show up to, like a school board meeting, or show up at some candidate forum, or show up at like X, Y, and Z town hall or public meeting, because it is sort of like through that in which you get a better understanding of some of the issues that might be at play, and also understanding of, how we can sort of collectively sort of, fight to, win on the issues that we want to win on. And, just like how we want to, fight to cancel student lunch debt. But it's, it really is about finding those, real problems that you might personally know, or what other people are facing, either because of the pandemic, or, because of Brian Fitzpatrick, or because of, the lack of, those, let's say, within, your local area that are able to run for office, or that, are stepping up to do something. And, as I'll say, I get it, like time is precious. And as I'll say, like, take the time that you have for yourself, how you can have it, because especially with the pandemic, I know a lot of people who, like mental health is definitely out of whack, or, trying to even figure out like, how am I putting together like, a couple different part-time jobs in order to like live and survive, and at the same time, are there ways in which, maybe you can just spend like a few minutes, just trying to get folks together and organize, or even if there are issues that you personally are facing that, there are other ways other than just saying, what, this bill, I'll pay it, with another part-time job or by, getting X, Y, and Z. Are there ways in which your, similar struggles are just like others and you can collectively come together to do something about it, like we're, sort of doing with this?
No, that's exactly it. And I think that, when you're with, I hadn't, plan to be even thinking about some of this stuff tonight, but I'm just recalling all these, like all these different organizers who I'm forgetting who they are. Like the books that I've read, it's killing me. But I know Jane McAlevey, for example, one who's just an absolutely amazing kind of labor organizer, right? All throughout our talk tonight, I'm hearing just like her voice, right, from her book. She's just an absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing organizer. But I'm also thinking about, some of these moments and things that I've read, or organizers that I've heard, and I mentioned labor notes, right? That I got the fundraiser going for to help their labor notes out. Is one of the things that they always stress is once you do organizing, right? Part of what you learn in organizing, and as Laura Putnam was saying too, you're exercising the muscles of democracy and so on. You also learn kind of what people bring to the table. Right. And you also learn that you don't have to do everything. Right. That, and I think about building sustainable movements, right, is one of those moments. I've had to come to terms with, I grew up, look, I'm Gen X, right, at a time where we were in a trial of like, organizing and kind of like progressive movements, and we were like squashed in between the baby boomers and the millennials as kind of the little generation that watched all the industry leave and like had like no hope for the future, right? And that was our ethos, kind of like, and it's like you're sitting there and you're doing activism during that time was like, you're the small group of like, punk rock kids or whatever, like I was, just doing this little thing. Now we're seeing this kind of explosion of organizing that's so incredibly exciting. But one of the things that was really hard, what we all, I remember, especially in my group of folks, is like everybody felt like they had to do everything, right? And if you weren't doing it, right, there's like shame associated with it too, right? Like, oh, I'm carrying my weight, things like this, as opposed to thinking about what you can and can't do in a very practical way. And I think that a lot of that kind of feeling of that ethos came out of like limited resources, really. And now, like the explosion of organizing that's going on, we have an opportunity to be so kind of like generous and kind and powerful, right, by kind of being there for each other and bringing what we can to the table, right? So I even think like, look, I may not kind of like have all this time to kind of doing all this door knocking and things like this, but okay, the least that I can do is I got this show, I got this thing, I do this well, right? Do social media work pretty well, right? Bring folks on the show and kind of share that stuff out, and that's a contribution, right? I still think I could do more, right? But that, seems like, okay, this is something that I can do, and how can I make the most effective use of what I have? And you see other people making those same kind of assessments. And so being kind to each other in the midst of all that is absolutely so critical as we build this movement. As I keep on coming back to that idea, is like part of what we're doing is we're enacting the future that we want to see. And part of that happens in terms of like how we build our movements around us. So that got us a little far afield from where we were going, but that's that's kind of like what I think about stuff.
I don't think so. And I'll like connect it to conversations that I've had sort of within Westchester of just with like different, let's say like student organizations or anything, and getting them to sort of understand let's say like the realm of possibilities that they can or could have, just like with any sort of organization, right? And like maybe right now an organization that you're a part of, you're donating, let's say like money or food and such to like a local like pantry, or maybe, to some like shelter or like X, Y, and Z. But, also thinking to yourself, outside of that, are there other avenues of, as you said, Jane, I can't say her last name correctly. McAlevey. Thank you. Extending those muscles of democracy and saying, what alternative ways or like additional ways to just donating money can I, help these organizations? Is there any way that, maybe I can be trying to advocate for certain, legislation that might be there to support, such, like programs or things? Are there ways in which I can try to get like, my local mayor or, like county officials and such to sign a letter to saying like, we should have this or we should have that, and bringing folks, together around that? When you see needs like that, and, while it can be, nice and simple to just, like do your, like deed of just saying like, here as an organization, we're donating and such. What else can you do? But as you said, Kevin, also, being very understanding of the practical implications of like, if you're like a, like a 3-person band, like, totally understandable if you, can't feel like you can do that, but see if you can take those little steps. Like, as I'll say that's how, like, I got into some of the PASSHE stuff that I was doing, and still slightly do to an extent, not as much as what I could do over the summer and, so on. But, like with that, it's things like that that really, get you into it. Or, just like even briefly, as I just find it's funny, and I want to at least like mention it, of like at the Westchester University Council of Trustees meeting, I spoke at like, not the most recent one, but the one prior, about like certain issues. And, I noticed that the Zoom meeting was being recorded, but there was never a posting of this recording. So what do you know? I make a phone call, I send an email, and then a little bit later, they post the recording, and now that's like a continuous thing that they'll do, right? So even those small little things, even though it seems so small, it's still something that can help even other organizers to understand like what things are at play, or what, areas or avenues, can I go to, or, just like finding these other avenues of putting political pressure or building power and movements like around things, right? Just think of it like the only reason why like, all these like school districts and school board meetings are as like well known and popular as they are is because of social media and because of recording of these meetings. So, similarly, that's what I think to myself, not like I thought of it in the moment for these like, Council of Trustees meetings at Westchester, but it can be the same thing just for your local school board or for like any sort of meeting. Having these recordings, getting steam going, by other people and able to share it out and get more folks involved in these organizing efforts, and even just giving them those little like, bits of, like ability to join in whatever effort that you're working on. Because, when they feel like that they'll have, and they actually do have some sort of, like democratic voice, let's say, in what you're doing, they're going to be willing to buy in more, or if they felt like that issue has impacted them or their families or friends. And, that's how you can really build these things out and really, gain power and use it for something like this.
I hear you. Well, this has been a great conversation, and I'm always heartened to talk to you, Nick, and to see the work that you're kind of doing and things like this. It's really, really awesome. And we've got, for everybody who's kind of still hanging on. Thanks to Chuck, thanks to Christopher, thanks Emily. Did I get everybody who's kind of like commented on it might be, if you're out there too as well, you're listening, but you haven't commented yet, so I can't read your name there. But thanks for the kind of engagement. I appreciate it. So we've got some great shows that are coming up in the weeks. It's just a matter of scheduling at this point on my end. So I wish I could give you a preview of what we're doing for next week, but I don't. I believe Cyril and I will be back this Wednesday. He just had another column drop last week. So look for the Wednesday show this week with Cyril Michaleko. But to give you some sense, I've got I know that for one of the Out to Coop Lives coming up, we're going to be talking religion and politics, right? We got another one coming up where we're going to be talking about climate change and kind of PA policy in the aftermath of the latest COP26 and the kind of climate crisis that is looming. We've got someone else that has been wrote a great piece for on Medium about what was happening in the Central Bucks School District in response, and then also in response to the New York Times podcast about that. Hope to get her on there too as well. So just a matter of kind of like finding times and scheduling all this stuff now. And now that the Thanksgiving break is now kind of in the rearview mirror, that's what I've got to do this weekend. So look, follow us on the socials, kind of check us out. We'll be letting you know what we got coming up at Out to Coop Live. But Nick, thanks for sticking around, and man, thanks for joining us.
No, again, just thank you, Kevin, for having me, and thank you to all who are listening. And check us out, as I'll just remind you one more time, Friday, if you're interested in, coming for the conversation, collaboration, learning, whatever that is, to join us sort of in this fight. Just Friday at 5 p.m., just email nolunchdebt@gmail.com, or check out the BuxMont DSA website, which is in the show notes, so on. You'll see the registration link, our video, our op-ed, and more.
There you go. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Always love Monday nights. It gets my week started out the way that I want to start it out, with all of you. So thank you all for all the work that you're doing and continue to do. We'll see you soon. See ya!
I'll fly away.